Hello and welcome to this session Integration with Excel. When we talk about interaction between MATLAB and Excel, we need to clarify what we need. Is it that data is sitting in Excel and we need to read it from it? Or do we want to create an Excel report writing some MATLAB output in it? Or perhaps are we MATLAB developers and we use Excel as our front end, and from there we want to call MATLAB functions? We could even launch a report from Excel, being a MATLAB program in charge of automatically generating it. Or we may be MATLAB developers and we'd like other people to run our MATLAB algorithms from Excel without needing a MATLAB license and not even know that those functions are not Excel. Of course, the speed will be the same as when we work within MATLAB. When we are developers of algorithms and we work within MATLAB, because at the end of the day, it's MATLAB behind it. When we think about we want to read data, which is in Excel, we could do it interactively or we could do it programmatically. When we do it interactively, we're going to see an example in a minute. We'll see we have an interface like what we're seeing in the screen, and we just point and click, and then MATLAB will generate the code itself. So that way we avoid having to program. The whole thing means that you can get to automate your processes, and eventually they won't need you to be there, only when you are planning it. And then MATLAB generates the code and automates everything. If you don't want to use these interfaces and you want to do it yourself, you can do it programmatically and use these functions. Read table could be very appropriate in many cases. It will allow you to, well, in all the cases really, you could use that. It will allow you to read data which is not homogeneous in the sense of you can have numeric data, you can have text data, etc. If you have only numeric data, you can go ahead and use read matrix. Both instructions will have different options, but they get used in a very similar way. That is when we read data. But what happens if you want to write data from MATLAB into Excel? Then you can use instructions like write table and write matrix with the same logic. When we think about where our data is, we can see here that that could be just a file that we have in our computer, for instance. So file location, we just present what it is and the name. Or we could think that that file is sitting in the cloud. It doesn't matter to MATLAB. We still go ahead and set the instruction. So we'd say read table, the file location, whether the file location is a local location or, as you see here, somewhere in the cloud. So you use it in the same way, whatever it is. Now we're going to go and see an example in action. So we go into MATLAB. We have here several Excel files. We downloaded this from our website. To do that, we use the instruction web save and just put the URL and you get all the files downloaded into the location you specify. So let's pick up one of those and right click to open to see what's inside. So you can see the format of this file, begin year, month, begin day, etc. These are the columns, and then every observation, it is a row. So how can we read this into MATLAB? Because when we want to do any analysis, the first thing we want to do is to read the data. So I'll double click here. We're going to do it, as I said before, in an interactive way. You can see it says opening a large text file. So it is a pretty big file, and that's why it's detecting this. Okay, so once you've got it open here, there are certain options you can adjust. You can say read everything as a table, or as independent columns, or if everything was numeric, etc. You can specify the range as well. And here, some unimportable cells, you can say replace them with nuns. So once you have that data is ready to operate on it, specifying whatever is none or is not none, ignore it or interpolate, or that is will be your decision. So here I could say import data. I'm going to specify the name of the variable that I want to read with that name. So import data. I don't know what it's doing. Okay. So it's importing data. Let's go and have a look. Here it is. If I double click, there you go. So you already can work with this variable. The other thing you could do here is you can say generate function, and MATLAB is going to generate a function that will read this file for you. You don't have to go and write yourself the read table instruction. So all these things that you see here, all these rows, are for robustness. All the algorithms in MATLAB are very robust in the sense of if you create an import file, which is a function that will read from a file, what happens if you call it without providing a file name, for instance? It could break. So MATLAB always avoids this. So this is all the error checking that you can see here. Different options that we'll be discussing in a minute, and then at the end you have the read table instruction. So if you realize you don't have to program anything, MATLAB has done it for you, which is called code generation, and that leads you to automate all your actions. Then I could save these, save as. I could enter the same name, import file. So once I have saved that, I could just come to MATLAB, and let's say the next month I have to read an Excel file. I can use that function and call, the new name, whatever it is for that month, and XLX, and it will read it. So I will just say data new or whatever, and it will read the new data. Okay, so that's how you automate the processes. Okay, so when we think about reading one file, the data from Excel into MATLAB, how about if we say we want to write instead? So let's say I have here my data, which I could have obtained from different algorithms or whatever, and now I want to write. I can just use the instruction read write table, specify the variable, and just any name that you want for the Excel that you want to create. Let's say I write this. Keep in mind it's quite big data, so it'll take a little while. You can see MATLAB is still busy. So we are in this directory. As soon as it finishes, we'll see how the new file has been created. Okay, while it's doing this, let's go to the documentation. I want to show you how, when you read, what options you have to specify. It has finished already. So we'll see the options that read table provides. If we have a look at this directory, I can see I have here my file, so it has created it, which if I open it, I can see is the same as the one before. Let me let it open because it's big. There you go. Okay, so it has the same format, month, begin day, whatever. But now it's not a CSV, it's an XLX, so we can see it nicely formatted. Okay. So I'll close this. So we were going to go into the documentation to see the different options. If I search for read table instruction, I can see your first, by default, you can just provide the name of the file, or you could also have different options, name value, and it gives you the different choices like the file type, uh, whether certain values you can treat as if they're missing, so you will ignore them in your analysis, how you want to deal with imported text, etc., etc. So this would be one way, or a different way is to use what we call detect import options, which is a different way of providing options for reading. Here it is. So I can call this function and provide the different options. As you can see in this example, when the input to detect import options, when MATLAB detects that is an Excel file, automatically you see here it says a spreadsheet import option. So it realizes the type of the file and it goes and deals with it as an spreadsheet import options. I could directly search that because what we're reading from is from Excel. This happens because you could apply detect import options to other type of files. But in our case, we're talking about Excel. So we'll go here. And now we go to the next example. Select the options I call this instruction. And then I set up in this object, I set up the column that I want, only the last name. The variable type is going to be categorical. And this preview is the same as if I was reading this file, but only a few lines. So it doesn't matter whether it was a huge spreadsheet, it's only going to read a few lines. So as you can see, when I read the spreadsheet specifying the options that I have determined with this instruction, then it's gonna do what these options say. So it's gonna read only the last name. And it is gonna be a categorical type column because it's a limited number of surnames and there is nothing between one and the other. It's not a continuous range. So this is how you can use the options. You define it once and then whenever you use the OPDS, it will apply that to any spreadsheet. One other option that you can use directly reading read table is when you call read table and specify format auto as a name value pair. What you say in there is that you specifically say not to follow the specifications given in detect import options, but let MATLAB just judge the type of data arriving in its column. Okay, another case that we may think is what happens if we want to read a particular column. So let's go here and I have a spreadsheet called bond data. It has this tab and this tab. So what I'm going to specify is I want to read this sheet, rating data, and clarifying that the first row is header line. So how do I say that? I come here and say detect import options. So the sheet rating data number header lines 1. So I'll just run this. And then I'm going to specify that the column that I want to read is only the column rating. And finally, I call with a new variable and say read table. So I'm going to read this spreadsheet with these options. If I go to this variable, you can see it has only read this column. In MATLAB documentation, you can find little tips, and one of the tips you will find for this read table is that the extension XLXS is slow, so Microsoft advises you to use XLSB type. So if you notice that it's a bit slow, if you use the other type, it'll go faster. So we've been seeing different options. I only show you a few. Read table with main value, detect import options, reading a given column, and we could think as well how we can read several sheets. Okay, so in MATLAB documentation, when we went here to read table, you saw certain examples, and some examples are going to refer to a spreadsheet called airline small. So let me go and search for another function, which is the one we're going to be using when, instead of talking about one specific spreadsheet, I want to talk about several spreadsheets or several tabs dealt with all together. And this instruction is going to be spreadsheet data store. Again, you could only use data store and let MATLAB know that we're talking about a spreadsheet. Okay, so you can search this and find different examples. This is the one I was referring to. So here, if you run this instruction, by the way, the help is interactive, so you can just select it and then right click and evaluate selection. So it will just run those instructions in the workspace. So I can just pick up this. I can just copy and paste it as well. So what I have here is a data store. And what is a data store? It's a pointer to a location. So I haven't read anything. I'm only saying, be ready, I'm going to be reading you. Because this could be a pointer to many spreadsheets, like the one I saw at the beginning when we have many CSVs. So you just put a pointer to the location and that's all. We haven't read anything yet. For the spreadsheet that you don't know where they are because they come with MATLAB documentation, you could just go and say which and the name of the spreadsheet, airline, whatever, and it'll tell you what it is. You will see it's in your installation of MATLAB. Okay, so let's say I want to open this spreadsheet from MATLAB. I just go and call it like that. There it is. So here you can see that I have 1 year, another year, another year, many years. They all different sheets. What happens if I want to read them all one after the other? MATLAB will treat them as a concatenation. It concatenates the second one after the first one, the third one after the second one. So it deals with them in one lot. So let's say the data store, I will just go and say sheets, and I will say equal empty. If you look in the documentation, that means all of them. Otherwise, you will have to specify 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, or whatever. But in this case, I want them all. So now I can write my own variable. You can choose any variable. And I just call read DS. When I say this, at this moment, I am reading the data. So now the data is in the workspace. I could only do this if the data fits into memory. If you had huge data set that cannot fit, then MATLAB knows how to deal with it using tall arrays. Okay, so what happens if I want to specify read all the sheets, but only one column out of all the sheets? Then I will reset my data store so it gets ready to start reading again. And then I go and say DS, and I specify which column. Okay, so if I now say my output variable, what I'm going to be reading, and I read that data store. Oops, I didn't put a semicolon. So then you realize we have them here. Okay, so here I didn't show you the output 1996, and then if I carry on further down, you see the next year and the next year. So as you can see, MATLAB treats them, putting one after the other, which makes it very easy because it's going to process them all in the same way. Okay, the last thing I would mention to you regarding reading, writing to MATLAB. Let me come here. Okay, it would be we've been writing with write table or write matrix, etc. What happens if you wanted not only just put the content and that's it, but what happens if you want to customize the format and say write in this cell and put in dark green or light blue or whatever, so you can customize it as much as you like. But instead of using write table, you could use a ActX server, which is an instruction that will allow you to be the master of Excel, and then you can just play with it at the very cell level. You can search more information in MATLAB documentation. This is just the data store I was talking before. Okay, so now let's see how we can call MATLAB from Excel. There are two ways, what we call spreadsheet link and Excel add-ins. The spreadsheet link, it is like a window. You look through the window and you can see everything that is in MATLAB. Not only what comes with the tools that you get from AdWords, but also any programs that you have made, any .m or any .mlx. It's just a window which the goal is you can have whatever you want in Excel as your front end, and from there you call MATLAB exactly the same as you would call any Excel function. For that, obviously, you need the MATLAB license because you are programming with MATLAB. The second option is what we call the Excel add-ins, and what it is you do the algorithms in MATLAB and you can give it to other people, other colleagues, customers, whatever, and they can run the same algorithms without having MATLAB. So for this, we're going to see different options. One of them could be with what we call MATLAB Production Server, and the other one with the MATLAB add-ins. We'll deal with them in a minute. Let's start first with the spreadsheet link. So for that, I'm going to go to, I'll close this and close that, start a clean spreadsheet. Okay, so let's say I have here whatever you want to have, tables with data or your usual day-to-day work, and you want to use some of that data that you have here as input parameters to a function. You can use one input parameter, you can use many. In this case, to make things simple in my demo, I'm going to just put one parameter called end, and the size, the value is going to be 5. As I say, you could put as many as you like. Okay, so how this works. You see I have this icon here. This means I've got a spreadsheet link installed. I'll tell you in a minute how you can install that. I've got it installed and then I'm going to use it. The first step is I start MATLAB. What's going to do is going to start a MATLAB session and it's going to link that MATLAB session with this spreadsheet. And from that moment, whenever I do things in Excel and sends data to MATLAB, it will be to that MATLAB session. So spreadsheet link works in three ways. With three steps. Step 1, I send data from Excel to MATLAB. Step 2, I run a MATLAB instruction exactly the same as I would run it in MATLAB, but in this case I'm going to run it from Excel. Obviously, that function will give me an output, so the step 3 will pick up the output, which is in MATLAB workspace, and bring it back to Excel. Which means from Excel, when I have my input data, I'm just running MATLAB functions which give me an output, and I don't even realize I've gone to MATLAB. I can do this in a manual way, semi-manual, and automatic. Let's do manually first. I select this cell and say send data to MATLAB. With the name, I can call it n, my variable called n. Then if I want to check, just for you to know, I come here and I can see, sorry, I forgot to clear the content before. I want to clear it so we don't get confused. Okay, so I'll do it again. Send the data to MATLAB in the variable n. I come here. Oh, sorry, it was in the other MATLAB. Oh, 1 second, it's going to be silly. Okay, so n is here and it has the value 5. Right, so I've done the step number 1. Step number 2, run a MATLAB command, and I want to say, I'm going to call a function called myMagic. Let me explain this function. I've got a function called myMagic, and all it does is to call magic function. Magic is in MATLAB, and I created this little function with it. myMagic picks up the input n and calls magic n, gives me this output set. That's all. So I could call myMagic from here, but instead I'm going to call it from here. Set equal myMagic n, because I know I have n in my workspace. Let's see what happened. Set is here, so it has done it. This is the output. And step number 3 is I want to pick up this output back from Excel. So I position myself where I want to have the output, let's say here, and say get data from MATLAB, and specify set, which is the variable with the output. And off you go. So this has been very manual. I could do it semi-manual with the following instruction. I could say MATLAB eval string, and here I say my data. My data, well, the output is going to be, let's put set z, and my data is in n, the input data. So what I want to run now is the same, but I put a different output variable to compare. So whenever it gives a 0, it means it has done it properly. I come back here, and I can see I have the variable there. So that was doing it in a semi-manual way, because I don't have to go to here and say run command. If I got it programmed in my cell, this instruction, all I have to do when I'm there is just enter. Or if you reevaluate all of the spreadsheet, then it will evaluate this cell. And finally, the most automatic way, it could be to come to this example. I'm gonna close this one. This example, so right click, open. Okay, so you can see the difference here is that I have this button. So this button have the instructions that I mentioned before, the ML eval string within a Visual Basic macro. So that means I don't have to be doing it manually. I would act the same way, start MATLAB to associate a MATLAB with this spreadsheet. takes a bit to open up. It's opening now. Okay. Okay, it's completely open now. So I'm gonna click here, and you can see it has run. It has run, and it checks the percentage. So it is calculating. You can see also that MATLAB is a lot faster than Excel. In this case, 97%. Every time you run is a bit different, but it's a lot faster anyway. Okay, so this is how you run it automatically. And if we want to see how we program this here, you can see, 1 second, we find MATLAB instructions. There it is. Okay, so from here we would start MATLAB, so we don't have to go and start MATLAB. We can just start in a programmatic way. And then we say put matrix. So what I'm saying here is put the content of the cell C2 into the variable nSteps in MATLAB workspace. Equally, the content of C3 in the variable nSteps in the workspace, and so on. And then eventually I'll get to a val string, where here is calling for the value of a derivative. Okay, so output variable, MATLAB MLX, and then the input. So this could have been exactly the same as our MyMagic example. And the last thing I want to show you before we go to add in is, let me close this because it was linked to the spreadsheet. Okay, I was showing you before how you could call MyMagic from here. One thing that I didn't show you, and I want to do now, is how I call the function with a breakpoint. So I'll go to my function. We opened another MATLAB and we didn't send the n here, so we need to send it back again. I'll position myself here, send data, we're using this name, and now I'll make sure I have a breakpoint here with the left bottom of my mouse. And if I now run the command set equal MyMagic, it will take me there step. So I advance one step, and now I can see set has been produced, and I can see the value. If this function was a lot bigger, it would be a lot more useful to be able to debug and stop in the different variables and see the value. So I just say continue, and you can see how MATLAB has created Z. So it has executed that value correctly. So this was the same as before, but we put in breakpoints and stop it in the middle. Let's close this. Okay, so we go back to MATLAB. Okay, we've been using this example with Excel to see how to communicate between Excel and MATLAB. I showed you before when I opened my spreadsheet that I had this icon, and I told you that I will show you how to make the icon appear for those of you who haven't installed Spreadsheet Link yet. So once you have a Spreadsheet Link toolbox, all you need to do is to come here, File, Options, Add-ins, Go, and you see how I have this clicked. For those of you who don't have it, all you have to do is browse and search here for the directory where you have your MATLAB installed. So you would just select this, select the right file, and click OK. Now I'm going to show you how to find this directory where MATLAB is installed in case you don't know it. But that's all you have to do, okay? And suddenly the icon will appear. This directory would be the following. You write here MATLAB root, and it tells you what it is. So you come here, you find toolbox, cell link, and you would select this file. Okay. So now we're gonna move on the second way that we mentioned, that how to call Excel, sorry, MATLAB from Excel. One way was with a spreadsheet link and a MATLAB license, and the second way was without MATLAB license. This case would apply when you want to share your algorithms with people who don't have MATLAB. The idea here is we have our algorithms, MATLAB algorithms, .m.mlx, and we'll be using our MATLAB compiler products to convert those MATLAB files into something else. It could be a .exe, it could be a CDLL, it could be a Java, .NET, etc. In our case, for Excel, which is what we care in this talk, we're going to concentrate in the fact that we can convert those MATLAB files into Excel add-ins or into .ctf files. And we'll see in a minute how we're going to use that. One will be imported directly by the user. I create my Excel add-in, give it to my colleague, he imports it into his own Excel, and he can use it from there on. And the other way is that CTF, instead of giving it to somebody who needs to import it into Excel, we'll just give that file to IT, who will be placing it somewhere. And this option is a lot more centralized, because they place that in a central location and anybody can call them from their spreadsheet without having to bring it to their own Excel file. Here we have created the function mymagic.mlx. What about if we want to give it to other colleagues who want to run it as if it was another of the Excel functions? Those colleagues won't even realize that it is a MATLAB function. In this case, the MLX is very simple, but it could be a very complex function, and you can call any function that you call from within MATLAB and at the same speed. You could even connect to external sources and create reports exactly the same as you do from MATLAB, because it is MATLAB at the heart of this. Okay, and we just said that we convert our MATLAB algorithm into an Excel add-in or a CTF file. But how do we do that? Let's go and have a look. I go to apps and I search for production server compiler. This is what I'm going to be using to produce that CTF file. And in this case, I'm going to choose this one because that CTF file can be called from Excel or from some other software. So I'll choose this option. And then what I will do here is I will pick up my magic, which is the file I want to convert, and click here, OK. I'm not going to do it because I already have done it before. But basically, once I click OK, then I would click package here, and when it finishes, I would obtain the following result. This file will be produced, sorry, this folder will be produced. And within this folder, I have this this other one. What this file is, the .exe, I will be using this, I will double click, and with that, the XLA, well, sorry, this one first, I will have to give it to the person, my colleagues, who are going to be calling my MATLAB algorithm without having MATLAB. So I give it to them, they double click on it, and then they get an XLA installed in their Excel. So basically what they do is they have a thin client into their Excel. We go to the other folder, and here we have the CTF. So we have to think on the client, the user, the colleague who is not going to have MATLAB. On the client side, which is himself on his spreadsheet, he will have the thin client installed, and then this CTF he will give it to IT. So IT will place it, this part would correspond to IT. IT would place it in a directory with all the other CTFs from different functions. One can value a derivative, the other one can calculate a value at risk, etc. And here is the person who wants to call that function from his spreadsheet. So this is the client, and here is the server. And how do we call that function from Excel? We would first need to have that MPS running, but for the sake of us developers of the algorithm, for the sake of us being able to test the algorithm that calls properly and it works properly, there is a little MPS functionality within our compiler toolboxes. And what we need to do now is to have that software running. For that, what we're going to do is we go to the project. This was the project that we opened when we went to the apps and selected MATLAB Production Server, and then this option, and this is where we hit package. So what we do here is we hit test client, and then we say start. What we're saying with this is MATLAB Production Server is running and is waiting to be called. It can be called from Excel, from somewhere, or it can be called from other software, any software capable of issuing an HTTP request. So several colleagues could be calling this in a concurrent way, no problem. So we now go to Excel, and since we have my magic ready and waiting to be called, let's call it. And here's the result of calling my magic. I could equally have called this with a breakpoint, so I could put the breakpoint, call it again, and there it is. I step through it, and I have the set. Continue, and I got the result. I can now stop it. You can see here it tells you when the server was called, whether it listened correctly, whether everything finished successfully. So here is a log of what was happening in the server, because we're pretending to be the MPS. MPS stands for MATLAB Production Server. So we have spoken about how to convert one algorithm into a CTF, but what happens if we wanted to convert a lot of them, 100 or however many? We wouldn't want to go into the app, the way we came here, the app, and then we search for here, and here we added our function and so on. What we would like to do is to be able to do it like in a mass execution, all in one go. A little trick that we can find here is this was the result of my compilation. So here is the log file, and what it tells me is the instruction when I hit package to produce that CTF. You can see here MCC with some parameters. So you can basically copy them, and instead of doing it through the app, you can directly give that instruction within the MATLAB command window. So this is the way how you could put this one, which is for one file, and another 20 or another 100 for every other file that you want to compile. So basically you would just, I would copy this. I will copy this and create a file. You can create here mass compiling, and here you can copy this MCC and another MCC for another file and so on. Then you just have to run this .m and all of them will run, and you will get the different CTFs in one go. Okay, so we have seen how you can call from Excel, you can call a MATLAB algorithm that has been transformed into a CTF, and then it can be called from different spreadsheets, from different people, different locations, and they all call the same, exactly the same version of the file. So it's all very centralized, and it doesn't give any error. It's always the latest version there, and so on. Another alternative I mentioned before would be you take your algorithm, your .mlx or .m, you convert it with the MATLAB compiler into an Excel-addin, and that Excel-addin gets put into the Excel of the person who wants to call the function. So when we come here, I would give, if I am the person creating the MLX, I give it to the person who doesn't have MATLAB but wants to run the algorithm. And the person would come here, developer, Visual Basic, and it would just come and import that bus file. Once it does that, that would be my magic would be available for the person to call it in exactly the same way as I call it with MATLAB Production Server. So it would just come here and write my magic in exactly the same way. But the difference is that he has his own add-in in his own spreadsheet. So every time the function gets modified, the person needs to make sure that he brings the new bus or the new XLA file into a spreadsheet. It works as well, but the other way is more centralized, and it's always the latest version that you call. So it's not room for that kind of error. With this, I covered everything I had for today. So as a brief summary, we've seen how to read data from Excel into MATLAB and how to write into Excel. Also, how to access, within that reading and writing, we mentioned the different options available within read table and write table, write matrix, etc. We also seen how to call from Excel, how to call MATLAB, two ways, a spreadsheet link and Excel add-in. And we've gone into the details and characteristic of each of those options. So I want to thank you for your attention, and if you have any question or any points you would like to discuss, please feel free to contact anybody in MathWorks. Here are my contact details, and thank you very much.